Hey Wyatt, how's it going, brother?
Hey Jay, what's happening?
Oh, not too much, brother. Just getting ready
Awesome.
for today. Having a good week
Yeah.
this week.
Not too bad actually. We finishing up a $30,000 kitchen remodel, so
Yeah, that's all right.
you can't complain. So yeah,
Right on, right on.
ready for tomorrow?
What do you mean?
We got a meeting tomorrow.
Oh yeah, yeah. Of course, I'm always ready. I have meetings every day, all day.
Yeah, I know. Well,
I
like I
hope
said, I
you're
do.
ready.
Yeah, no kidding. I do apologize. Like I said, I saw her thing come across, and I read 8:45 on my phone, or it's 5:45, and so I thought it ended at 5:45.
Gotcha.
I didn't realize it was starting at 5 o'clock.
Yeah, gotcha. We'll get going here very shortly. Whoa, look at that crazy hair.
I'm wrapping up a job right now. Putting up tools. So I'll be
Okay,
on. I'll be jumping on here. I'll be listening in the background for a few minutes, but I just gotta get things wrapped up.
right on.
So
All good, brother.
You got your camera.
Yeah, sort
How
of.
nice is that?
I know it's been a crazy, crazy week, I must admit.
I may have to skip in and out. I'm really busy, Jay.
What's that?
I may have to skip in and out. I'm really busy. Lots of jobs coming up now.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, the good
We
ones
were all
too.
concerned yesterday, eh?
No, I'm never concerned. I just worry about my guys not having work, right?
Yeah, no, I hear you.
They don't work, I don't work.
That's right.
So, yeah, Greg's supposed to pop on too, but he might be popping on from home.
Okay.
Be right back. I left my coffee on the coffee machine. What's it about today?
Today we're going to talk about productivity. So sort of what we were talking about earlier on our call. We're going to be talking about how to get your subs and your crews working efficiently.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
We had another guy called Greg the other day. I never gave him the message yet, but apparently Greg
Yep.
ran into him in a supplier and he used to work for us.
Okay.
Now he's doing his own thing, so he's wondering if Greg wants any subcontract work done. So I have to give Greg.
Right.
So
Yeah, it's a common thing that comes up, right? It's just the whole management side, especially if you've either, only used subs. I get that a lot where they're hesitant to use employees. And also if they've, maybe only had employees and now they're thinking about using subs, right? So
well, we
it's
would
all
only use
kind of
subs
the
on the
same.
projects because we that's where we lose the money is on the labor of the project. So
Yeah,
I think Greg was
yeah, and
talking
that
about
happens a lot, especially as you start to grow and expand. That's where your inefficiency comes from, right? So,
yeah. Yeah, we just need to make sure that, like Greg was talking about earlier, that they don't overuse the materials. Like
right,
we'll have a couple of our foremen on site watching the job too. So
right.
yeah,
Well, we're gonna get all this knocked down today. See if
good.
we can.
I don't know where he is, so he should be coming on. He said he was.
Yeah, I'm just gonna give it one more minute, and then we're gonna get rocking and rolling here.
Okay. Hi, Sue.
All right, let's get going. All right, guys. So, welcome everybody. Today we're going to be discussing how to get your crew, in-house or subcontractor to work more efficiently. And this particular topic's near and dear to my heart. I feel like I have this conversation multiple times a week with many different contractors doing different things, but ultimately it always comes down to the same thing. How do we get staff motivated, wanting to work, following our instructions, and giving us the least amount of headaches as possible? How do we do that, right? Because again, we know that in order to grow our business, we need two main resources. We need enough leads and opportunity, enough sold jobs, backlog, and we need people to take care of those jobs. All right. Not always as easy as that. So let's go through just a very simple standard system that I've been using for many years to make sure that my subcontractors or my crew members or my staff, they all start off in the same foot. Okay, now I'm going to give you the simple version today. Chances are you're missing pieces of it. And I want you to kind of think about the action items that we're going to take from today's discussion. So this is an action item, an action taking training. All right. There's probably going to be some pieces in here you can immediately implement and use. So let's start off with when we start a new subcontractor or a new employee, it doesn't really matter. All of them need a onboarding process. I find I'll start with subcontractors. I'll find the biggest area for improvement most contractors can make is making things simple from the gate. Okay. So what I'm going to share with you in the resource folder here, I am missing some of the forms. I'll make sure that they're on when I share it again. But let's talk about their journey. So when a new subcontractor is, or we're considering hiring a new subcontractor, before we even meet with them to interview, to do all that, we send them out in a subcontractor standard operating procedure. And basically what this is, all right, is this is a blanket contract that we use with our subcontractors that very simply says, here's what we are prepared to offer, all right? So we'll communicate everything that we know about the job and we'll get you whatever you need as soon as we possibly can. So it goes through the exact things that I'm going to do as the contractor. All right, we're going to pay promptly when your work is inspected, approved for the production manager. Okay, and then I have what we expect directly from them. All right, now you'll notice when I say the word contract, all right, a lot of people think lawyers, think complicated. Like, I didn't write this, and I don't encourage that you do to have colorful language. All right, this isn't. I want this to be very clear because I'm actually going to use this as a tool. Okay, and you'll see this is very straightforward, direct, what I expect, what we will do, how we will handle things. All right. What my expectations are that they're there 7:30 to 4:30, that they complete the job, and without taking any days out. So, I mean, I've heard that a lot of times. You get a subcontractor start something and then he disappears for a week, right? We don't allow that. We're not going to accept that. Okay. We don't allow smoking. All right. That's a big thing for us. No smoking on the job sites. All right. But I use this document ultimately to make it very clear. Now, here's the truth of the matter. I could have them go ahead and sign this agreement, knowing damn well that most of them barely read or barely comprehended the document. Okay, it's clear as I can make it, and this is okay. I wish it was different, but in my particular trade and my business, it tends to happen a lot, as it will probably happen in yours as well. Okay, so this is how we handle it. These are the things, these are the boundaries that you now need to reinforce. Okay, so I can promise you, and when we go through this system today, you'll see every subcontractor is being evaluated on every job. Okay, same as our crews. All right. Now, when they start out, when they start off with us, we've had 0 subcontractors score perfect on our card. 0. Although, as direct and clear as it is, I have yet, in my 20 years experience, have a subcontractor that comes out of the gate that's perfect. All right. Pretty close, but not perfect. Most of them would fail, all right, on their first job. Okay. Now, where contractors themselves fail is that they don't hold boundaries. They don't hold expectations with their trades, with their crews. All right. So this is something that you need to be prepared from the very beginning of coming in and enforcing. Okay. So let me give you an example. A subcontractor shows up day one, does everything right, except for his guys are not wearing our uniforms, and we find them smoking on the customer's property. All right. Now, most contractors would be like, well, close enough, not going to say anything and let it slide, right? We let those little things slide. We don't allow that. All right. So right away, we're giving write-ups. We're expressing to them that they have not met the agreement terms of our subcontractor. And unfortunately, my experience has been is you have to be fair, but you have to be almost a dick about things. Okay. Because if you're not, then the typical thing is they're just not going to respect you. Okay. And I know that sounds, a little off. We all want to get along with our subs, and maybe you guys have some different experiences, but my experience is like, let's get the fundamental rules clear first. All right. And then we can work on our relationship. All right. But if you're not willing to follow my fundamental boundaries and rules, all right, that allow us to engage in business, and these are the promises I've made to my customer, all right, then there's no reason for me to continue doing business with you. Okay. And we're very, very clear with that language. It's got to be very firm, very straightforward, or else you're going to end up finding yourself repeatedly saying, but you should have done this, but you should have done this. Or repeatedly, maybe having to clean up after them, maybe having to go back and do service work. Like, all of these things is what ends up puts you in a situation where it's maybe not worthwhile using subs, right? Now, on the other end, we have employees. Okay, we have staff, we have crew members. All right, it's very important that when we have a crew on a job site, or even anything over a 2-man thing, I consider a crew, that we're setting the same expectations for them. Okay, we're setting the same standards. You'll notice, like, whether it's a subcontractor or not, we need the same standard of business being conducted on our behalf. Now, where it splinters here, okay, is how we look at our subcontractors. Okay, so first mistake that I see a lot of contractors make is treating a subcontractor like they're their employee, right? Big no. All right. The second big mistake I see a lot of is not understanding or classifying your subcontractors. All right. So in my opinion, again, this is my humble opinion, there's 2 types of subcontractors. Okay. There's one subcontractor that is basically one step above an employee, that maybe has his business registered and everything else, but he's genuinely just looking for a higher paying, job. He's on the job sites. Maybe he has 1 or 2 guys. All right. I tend to prefer using these type of subs, and I'll explain to you why in a second. All right. But they're generally just looking to do their job and go home. All right. They're not moving around a lot. They tend to be loyal with you. If you're giving them enough work, maybe they have 1 or 2 other customers, but they're, in the most part, they're not proactively going out and trying to generate their own business. Okay. And it's a very distinct difference. All right. And then you have contractor, we'll say the contractor one. Now, this is somebody that's essentially using your business to fill in their schedule, which is absolutely fine. And I encourage it. Okay. Provided that they're going to follow your terms and conditions of doing that work. Right. So I have relationships with other competitive companies that are in my competitive network. We talk back and forth, and they've sent me crews many times when I've been in a pinch, and I've done the same. Okay, that's absolutely fine. But understand something about those particular subcontractors. They're really just filling in their schedule. Okay, so a big mistake you make is becoming over dependent on that. All right, so what happens when demand goes up? They disappear. When demand's down, all of a sudden they're there. So you could make the mistake, and generally they're pretty good. They're going to perform a little bit better than your first version of a sub. Okay, in my experience. All right, the first version of the sub, he's a little bit slower. Again, he's going to have some habits that you have to break, and at a certain point, they do almost feel like employees, but they're not. Okay, these guys, again, they're going to have, they move much quicker. They may have a different experience set. Like, again, they're a little bit more advanced. And the issue that comes about with that is maybe they move very quickly. Maybe they can get a lot of jobs done. And you go, oh, wow, I'm going to jump on this. I'm going to keep feeding this guy work. And then he just ultimately disappears one day. Where does that leave your business? What's that do to you? Right? Has anybody had this happen, perhaps? Anybody here had a really, really good sub, came in with blown away with, how quickly they can move, and then they just disappear? Or something happens and all of a sudden they can't do your work anymore? Okay.
Yes, I have.
For sure. If you've been around long enough, we've all had this experience. In my younger years, I made some critical mistakes in relying on these guys and kind of pulling away from using my own in-house crews and my own guys. And again, it cost me dearly, right? Because now everything's super busy and I can't find a crew, right? So I don't make those mistakes. And really, this is about balancing, right? So again, if you're getting to scale, it's very hard sometimes to scale with just employees. And it's also very hard to scale with just subcontractors. All right. There is a place for both, right? We've got to find that balance. And I found by just understanding the structure of, who you're doing business with and making sure we're not putting all our eggs into one basket is what's critical for your success, right? So we don't want to become over leveraged is the word. Okay. Also, some problems can come about that if a subcontractor becomes equal with you, all right, and by equal means that he's doing all of your work and he knows it, all right, that gives him an unfair advantage with you. All of a sudden, he can negotiate other rates. He can do a whole bunch of things that you don't want to have happen. You fundamentally lose control, and that's not productive for business in a lot of situations. Okay, so again, I encourage you having continuous recruitment and hiring of subs, even if you're not ready for them just yet. Continue having those conversations, continue nurturing them, having them involved, because you just never know when it's going to work out, right? So I give the exact same advice for employees, for technicians. All right, we should always be recruiting. All right, we should never allow our pipeline to run dry. Okay, so now let's talk about on our employee side. Obviously, if you've been around long enough, you know that I highly recommend an onboarding process. I have the same for my employee or for my subcontractors. They go through an onboarding process, although much shorter, more to the point. So again, aligning with my document, my subcontractor agreement, my blanket agreement, I'm going to make sure that they have, whether they use it or not, but I'm going to make sure they know what tools we expect them to use. So company cam, things like that. I'm going to make sure that they understand that they need to post and where they need to post. I'm going to make sure they understand the rules to playing my game. Okay. And I'm going to make that super clear. So in the document I shared with you guys, I've given you guys a couple of different variations of subcontractor agreements. Everybody should have one of these before you start any subcontractor. Okay. Now, let me be super clear on this. Although the laws are different in province to province, state to state, ultimately, what you do not want to have happen is your subcontractor being deemed an employee, all right, or a dependent subcontractor. There's some classifications of that. And let me explain what that means. Is in the eyes of the government, especially here in Canada, and I know down in the States the same thing, the classification of a subcontractor is based on, certain activities that you do with them. So if, for example, you supply a truck and that subcontractor goes to work for you basically by the hour, and you're trying to claim him as a subcontractor, they're going to very quickly say no. And now you're liable to pay all of the source deductions and all of the, the requirements of having an employee. And he may have, other legal routes that they can take with you, wrongful dismissals, things like that. So how do we make sure that our subcontractor remains independent from our business, right? If we're using a subcontractor, all right? So a couple of things. You'll notice that the subcontractor agreement I shared with you, that's more of a blanket. That's an original agreement when we're coming in. But each job that you carry with that sub, all right, should have its own work order subcontractor agreement. Actually, let me show you an example of one. I've got a few in here. I haven't added to it, but here, we'll just share this with you. 90 minute. I don't know why that's not letting me open it, but okay. I have to come back to that. Sorry about that, guys. Seems to be giving me a hard time. Oh, there it is. You guys can see my screen okay? Yeah. Okay, so again, each job now, all right, and for the sake of having a good relationship, should be very clear and detailed in terms of handing over a subcontract agreement, all right, a subcontractor specifically to the job, right? So we include our scope of work, what we are asking to perform, any measurements, things like that. This would be typical for us, okay? Again, what this is saying is basically we treated them as if, they were the customer, okay? We want to make sure that we have these agreements. If they ever come in to do an audit, you want to make sure that they're at as arm's length as possible, okay? Now, a little bit more advanced to this method and what I'm suggesting here. A lot of you guys have some big problems with subcontractors around the material. And I was actually just discussing this with Greg. One of the solutions to that is actually to sell them the material that's required for the job. Okay. So for example, you have I'll use an electrical project. All right. You scope it out and you actually sell them the material. Okay. Who's responsible for waste at that point? Who's responsible for theft? Anybody?
It would be
It would be who?
the person you sell it to, essentially, because they bought it from you.
So and let's think about it. Let's put this into perspective, right? Again, should you be accountable for the material on a job when somebody else is doing the work?
No.
No, right? The idea of having a subcontractor is to reduce your liability or exposure, right? You're paying a premium to have another, subcontractor come in. You want to reduce the amount of exposure you have to your business. So again, one of the easiest ways to keep them as independent as well as, a separate. Now, again, maybe you purchase it and you bring it in and drop it, but I've gotten into the habit where we sell it to them on paper, right? The other thing of it, if you want to be, as an advanced form of this, is I want my guys to be buying material from me. All right. I want them, if they're doing their own jobs and their own projects, that's a great opportunity now to capture some of that business that, would have otherwise gone to another supplier, right? Now, again, not everybody's set up that way, and I don't recommend it if you're not, if you're not fully aware and you don't have good systems in place to actually perform this. So again, if you're just starting out with subs, totally ignore what I'm saying here. If you have a little bit more advanced business, all right, I would highly recommend that you become the supplier to it. All right, that also gives you another layer of protection when they're coming in to designate whether you're independent or non-independent. Okay, so again, they bought the material. They are totally independent on that that project. Okay. Any questions about that? I know that's it can be a little confusing. Anybody in that situation currently, where they're supplying a lot of material and having issues?
Yeah, we have that where we supply some wire and the
Yep.
guys on site don't keep track of where it is or
Right. Well, because who
bring it
cares? It's not
back.
theirs.
Yeah.
Right. So this would be, and again, Johnny, just definitely for you in terms of a scale plan. All those kind of big items, wire, stuff like that, you should be selling it to them as a supplier, as a supply agreement. Right? Now, again, they get to keep all the leftovers, everything else. Also, the other side of it is, you know, how many times has there been a work or change work order where it's been missed? Right?
Yeah.
So again, you know, the sub's going to be a lot more aware when it's coming out of his own pocket. Okay, and again, it's removing that liability or that exposure that is just unnecessary if you're paying that premium.
Yeah. So how do you work that for
Okay. Now,
Mark?
same thing goes with a crew themselves. So say it again.
I was just wondering, how do you work that, selling it to them with a markup and margin?
You mean marking up the product?
Yes.
Yeah, there's no difference. There's no difference in there. So like again, I sell it like I have a retail price for my material, right? That again, if I'm selling it as a supplier only or supply only agreement, that I sell it at. But you're buying it back, right? So in the subcontract, it's a wash, right? It's basically just an exchange. Okay, but they own it. So again, they bought that material on paper. All right, so again, if you want to run it at your cost, so be it. All right, and they're essentially purchasing that, which you're now going to deduct off that change order. Now if there's extra material and stuff like that, again, you know, maybe maybe you want to add a bit of a surplus to it, but it definitely wouldn't be what you're charging your customer if you want to continue to sell it to them.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay. So now let's kind of talk about, you know, the situation now with a crew. All right. Now, and I'm saying crew again, I'm not talking about the individual employee. That's a totally other lesson, but I mean, in terms of having a crew of employees, all right, we generally will have a crew leader or a lead hand. All right. It's super important that we're training them on a specific set of skills, right? One of the big things that I found is having them be able to actually document as they're going through it, reducing your liability, having them use, you know, tools like company cam, change orders, things along those lines that keep you protected, right? Having them do daily work reports. Okay. As a crew, they need to be able to do that. Now, where's this all lead to? Ultimately, on every job, we should have a scorecard. And I'm going to show you some examples of those today. All right. But we want to be able to have, if you want a high performing, highly productive crew, whether it's subcontractor or employee, you have got to gamify it. You've got to make it a situation where everyone's in a win-win as much as possible. Okay. And that people know where they clearly stand. Does that make sense? Right. So let's go through that. Now, in terms of evaluating the work, does anybody here do an evaluation? Has anyone done an evaluation of their staff or employees? Okay.
We do them for our employees, but
Okay.
not like a crew like you're talking about.
Yeah. So now think about it this way, right? Like, how would you know when a crew, whether it's in-house or other, right, or a subcontractor, how would you know when like you had a problem? Anybody had a passive aggressive staff member or passive aggressive sub before? Somebody must have. I feel like that's a trick question. Of course you have, right? They don't come right out and say what is pissing them off or what they have a problem with. They tend to take it out on you how?
Oh,
During
mine
the
tell
process.
me, mine tell me when they're ticked off and why.
Okay.
No worries there.
Yeah. So, and I mean, I encourage it, but I also know from experience, like the more you handle of these guys, it's sometimes very hard to, and nor should you try to be playing, you know, politician all the time, right? A lot of times the way that we discover problems is actually by the behavior. So less about what they say, because somebody can come up and say whatever, and I've long learned to stop listening to what people say, as bad as that may sound, especially on the sub and you know subordinate level, because one second to the next, they could be saying two different things, right? Their emotions are not aligning with what is actually happening. Has anyone had someone that over exaggerates things, makes bigger deals out of stuff than it should be? Okay. All of this is behavior that you have to decide if you're willing to accept. So just like last week, when we talked about classifying customers, you need to classify your crews. You need to classify your subcontractors almost in the same way. But we need to have a clean scorecard if we want to improve that. So if you want to move somebody from possibly a C level subcontractor to an A or a B, all right, you've got to give them a opportunity to actually know what it is that you want, right? The easiest way is to have, you know, a set or an ability to mark how a customer or how a subcontractor is performing or how a crew is performing. All right, doing this regularly enough. And these are very black and white. So it's all about removing the gray area that you may have, right? The things that maybe weren't said, maybe weren't expressed, and that, you know, has an impact on your job, right? So again, here's an example I'm going to share with everybody here. This is more for a general contractor, right? But you know, when we're scoring them from job to job site, all right, and years for depending on your business would be a little different for each one. But again, it becomes a very easy practice, all right? It has an easy way and it becomes accumulative, meaning that you can see patterns and you can see what's going on as you start to accumulate these reports. And these become very easy. I'd highly recommend you systemize them. We're using now with AI, you know, where these things can be submitted very quickly and easily. And then AI can actually keep a score, and you know we know where each crew is sitting. Okay. We also look at production. We look at a couple other key areas to know, you know, again, who we're going to be dishing work out to, because just like your customers, all right, your A subcontractors, all right, you shouldn't be sitting at them at home while a C or a D is taking work. Would you agree? Right? That doesn't make much sense. Okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
Agreed.
Right. So, and again, it's, you know, once you start to develop these standards of what you expect and you're willing to stand by them, you're willing to enforce them, you will see a dramatic difference in how quickly your jobs get done, how efficiently, your customer satisfaction. You will see improvements in every single key indicator point. All right. But having them and being willing to, you know, go through the process of measuring them, although easier than it's ever been before, ever. All right. It's not about, you know, having paper forms or anything anymore. This can be actually a very simple process. But you got to be willing to set those standards at a place where it's going to benefit your business consistently, right? So here's another, you know, example of it. Again, you know, looking at all of the areas where, you know, things can come off the rails, right? And as you get down to the crew level, again, those would be employee evaluations that can be done. Yeah, I'll show you one of these, you know, by the individual, by the crew leader. Okay. And again, don't try and use these on a paper side. I would highly recommend you digitize them just for speed and accuracy and being able to generally collect all of these. Okay. Now, I get this a lot, and maybe you guys have had this experience. What happens when a subcontractor, you know, starts a job and then disappears for 3 or 4 days? What do you guys do? What's your steps? How do you handle that? Anybody? No one's going to tell me, are they? Okay. So first thing that gets issued, notice to perform. Okay. So we're going to make it very clear that they've crossed the boundary. all right, that the work has been abandoned. All right, we're gonna tell them that they have within a certain amount of time. Same with back charges and stuff like that. But we're gonna document and be very clear with them that their boundary has been crossed. All right. Now, my policy is if someone's been, missing in action or has abandoned a job without any communication or a justified reason, they're getting notified this, whether they're my best sub or not. All right. And I'm gonna have a crew prepared to go and take over that project, and they're gonna pay the expense of that. All right. So again, using subcontractors, you're supposed to be reducing your payment liability, right? If a sub isn't performing to standard or isn't performing the work at a workmanship level that's acceptable in your agreements, all right, you have to be prepared to be the bad guy. You have to take control. Letting it slide or just letting it be or begging or pleading, like that's all a very weak approach to it. The first thing is don't say anything, all right? Document it. All right, make sure it's communicated directly. Make sure that they understand that, again, there's going to be consequences to that inaction. All right, and be prepared to manage that liability that you now hold. Okay, holding back money, I get that question a lot. Couple of things, it depends on your trade, what you're doing, but for most part, if you have a subcontractor coming in, all right, if you're a general contractor, again, these rules all apply to it. Right, we need to be able to notify them in writing, and you will see an immediate, sort of change in attitude when you start, when you start making very clear demands. All right, and at that point, you're in your rights to make demands. Okay, so I made a notice to perform. Okay, that's my first step. Okay, my second step is back charge. Okay. So they're going to know right away, and this can be used in a number of other different places. So for example, you've inspected the work and it's not the standard. You've informed them in writing that they've got a punch list or any other items that are outstanding, and then they don't respond. Okay. You got to be prepared to take the next step. You got to be prepared to escalate that issue or that situation. All right. And ultimately what this is going to mean to you, all right, is that we get to, come in and charge them a full service rate. Right? So call out fees, the whole 9 yards. If you have a crew going there, you would also be including your overhead and profit. Okay. So you also need to be charging a full rate. Why do you have to do this? Anybody guess why you have to do this and why it would be silly of you not to? Why would you not give a discount on a back charge?
It's a cost to you.
Absolutely. So why should you not profit? You had to make you had to change course, change your schedules, move guys around. It's embarrassing. You have a high turnover, by the way, with guys that if you've had a series of bad hires or bad subcontractors and you've had your service guys cleaning up after them, that takes a big toll on your business. There's high risk there, right? Guys get fed up with it. Why'd you hire these clowns? And it's always going to be your fault. I mean, at the end of the day, right? So again, back charge notice goes out. We make it sure that it's clear, like this is what it's going to cost you, all right, if it hasn't been done. Sometimes they'll accept it, right? They'll say, hey, you know what, I'm too busy, I can't come back to it. No problem. I'm still profiting off of that, all right? Now, that will also be a big black mark against them, and I probably won't use that sub again, right, if I have to do that. Now, I have had situations where, again, these things come up, and they have to be dealt with accordingly, but it's about the standard way that you're dealing with it. If you're dealing with it in different ways in different situations, you're going to find a lot of reoccurring problems, same problems over and over again. All right. So you need to really make sure that you have a clear process on how do we deal with this, right? When this happens, what happens, right? So having the back charge notice, having these evaluations, all of this documentation, it may seem like a lot of work and a lot more extra stuff to do, but I mean, put it into perspective, right? Compared to what, right? Compared to just letting it slide or letting them go. Has anybody had a subcontractor, cause some damage and then disappear, or not finish a job, get paid and not finish? Right? I know I certainly did in my earlier years, not now, but in my earlier years for sure. I think if we're all being honest, we've had it happen at one point or another, employees, staff, whoever. I mean, that's part of the risk of being a contractor as well, right? Is not everybody is going to, treat your business with respect. Not everybody's going to, come out with the best intention. And, some people try to do things that they just simply aren't built for, right? And I've seen that happen many, many times, right? We've got to be able to prepare to handle those things, have our set course of how to manage that situation, all right? Or else it's going to be a reactive thing, right? It's going to be you kind of improvising as you go. And also your emotions can really mislead you on some things. So for example, a subcontractor gives you the old song and dance about his kid's sick, his mother's sick, the pastor died, whatever the story is, and you buy into that, only to find out that he's lying to you, and all of these delays and everything else that are happening, when your first step should have been to take, is to hold your own policy to the challenge, right? The same thing goes, in holding them accountable. Would your client hold you accountable to your contract? Right? Would you hold your customer accountable to their contract? You should be, right? It's a tool. There's clauses in there are meant to make sure that we don't have these misunderstandings, make sure that the expectations are clear. Okay? So when you don't enforce these things, when you let these things slide, all right, you're really doing yourself a disservice. Now, I've gotten it a lot of times, and I completely understand where this is my best guy, and he started, he did this thing, right? Let's say, he disappeared for a week and went on a bender. Okay, I don't give a shit, best guy or not. Okay, I don't care. My holding the policy, holding the procedure, all right, is where we separate the men from the boys, right? Because at the end of the day, you got to be prepared to enforce these things. Having the system and not using it makes zero sense. But all it takes is you letting it slide once or twice, and then it becomes the normal. And then it becomes acceptable. All right. And like I said, you can very quickly take somebody that was ultimately performing at an A or B level, and then just by letting them get away with little things at a time becomes a big problem, right? And generally subs, in my experience, have not, they're not lifetime employees, okay? They're going to come and go. That's just the nature of the business. Other opportunities are going to come up, all right? They may have started off really good, 4 or 5 jobs in, all of a sudden, the bad habits start showing, right? Them not showing up and stuff like that starts to come out. That's where you need to have this, and you can't let those things slide, because if they think that they can get away with it, they will. You've left the door open. Okay. Now, does this mean you have to be an asshole or a dick or scream and yell? Absolutely not. In fact, the opposite. For you guys that are less aggressive, this is why you want to have these documents. This is why you want to have this system in place. All right, is that you don't want to be put in a position where somebody's trying to take advantage of your business, and you don't know how to get them back on track, right? You don't know how to get them back in place, and more importantly, making sure you're protecting your end, right? And I'll say this last little piece about it. I mean, once you enforce it once or twice, all right, it's just like an electric fence, in my opinion, maybe a terrible example, but like, they're going to get zapped once or twice. It doesn't mean the relationship's over. It doesn't mean you can't keep working with them. And I've had so many situations like this. Guys that work for me now have been warned, right? It's me saying, there's the boundary, cross it again, and this is what's going to happen, right? And I'm prepared to actually take action on that. Okay, is there anything that is uncomfortable about that? Is there anything saying that I'm being unfair, or any recourse that you would? No, I'm enforcing my contract. In fact, again, they're going to respect me a lot more for the fact that I would take the gloves off and hold them accountable, rather than just letting everything slide, right? Because in that case, who's in control? They
It'd be
are.
it'd be the same thing as if you're dealing with a client that's trying to back out on a contract. You'd still send them a breach of
110%.
contract.
You got it, my man. It's the exact same thing. That's what I'm trying to draw the comparison to. I hold my customers accountable to the contract we sign. I always go back to it. We use it as a tool. We leverage it. We do the same with our subs, because again, at the end of the day, this is for a lot of us, this is a game and a championship won by inches. right? So these kind of leverage points really make a big difference, and how you communicate. And more importantly, I think the big thing that I'm trying to drive home here is this should be something that's standardized, so that, you know, when you have project managers, when you have other people managing, you know, your business for you, it's being managed in a standardized way, right? Because all of a sudden you've armed your staff. All right. So maybe you're a little more aggressive and a little bit better with the subs. Okay, great. Now you got to scale, hire a project manager. What tools are we arming them with to discipline and to hold your trades accountable? Right? Anybody had this experience before where, you know, your project manager or someone's come back to you and complaining about the subs and they don't listen, they don't do this, or the employees, they don't listen, they don't do that, and you look at them like, what's your actual job here? Like, what are you doing? Anybody had that frustrating experience where it feels like, you know, all the problems come up to you or come back to you? Yeah, absolutely. I don't think anyone here could honestly say that they didn't, right? At one point or another, right?
I
Even a
have.
crew leader. And really what that is again, it's a lack of a system there that tells them, oh, hey, this has been crossed. Here's the step. Here's how we handle this, right? Here's the tools that you have. This is the way I'm going to empower you to hold people accountable to the objective, right? Is there any gray area? And you're going to find, again, as you start to implement this, you're going to find other gray areas you didn't even think about, right? Like, certainly my document has changed 100 times. Things get updated. I'm still learning new stuff all the time. I'm still seeing ways that, you know, problems can arise without, you know, ever imagining them. So again, this is an evolving thing, but the point here is that we've got to be willing to set the standard and at least the basic framework on how we're going to manage subs, how we're going to manage crews. All right, because if you're going to scale, it's going to be based on having good crews, good subcontractors. All right, and a lot of us aren't playing this game at a professional level. We're playing it at a minor league level maybe, or, you know, a house league level if you're into hockey much, right? We're not really playing it at the professional level where everything is being documented, everything is scorecarded. Okay, any questions so far? I feel like I've just gone on a long rant here.
Hey, Jay,
Yeah.
one thing that we also do is a daily log
Yes,
that
sir.
our superintendents carry. And
Mhm.
that way it tells us what subs are there, what employees that were, how they acted and everything like that. And that way
Yep.
that daily log is also available for, you know, our project manager. So whenever they come into the situation with the clients wanting to know different things, so now they've got everything there, so that way we can start moving forward on
100%.
some
This
things.
is so, again, maybe you caught it a little earlier when I was explaining it. We're actually moving into using an AI that we do our daily reports into. And a part of that is like, if there's an issue, it's already telling them, it's giving them the suggestion. So for example, like, you know, they had an incident or a safety incident on site. They're gonna inform, you know, the chat bot to let them know, and it's gonna, you know, tell them what the next steps are. So they have to fill out this form, or they have to, you know, do that. I feel like that's where a lot of this will be headed shortly, and especially with the technology. But that's all a big job report. It's just a matter of connecting all those data points and then being able to see the big picture, which is exciting on the technology side. But, you know, if you're using daily job reports, awesome. That's a bedrock proven system that works, you know, fantastic. We've been using them for many years, and it's very, very efficient. Anybody else here using Company Cam or anything along those lines? I guess a few of you guys are for sure. Right? So your daily reports, having everything digitized. All right. Again, where this conversation leads to speed. All right. And we all know money loves speed. All right. It's great to collect data. It's great to have some of these things, you know, definitely some of these systems. For most of us, though, we really don't have the resources to kind of use that data to our advantage. Right. So if we're using paper, for example, and job reports, who was I just talking to about this? I think it was Sue about reports coming back and like the paper reports, if you
It
get them
was
back at
me.
all, or chicken scrabbled, right? Like those days really we have to put behind us. getting things digitized and being able to have that data, be collected and analyzed is really where, where everything is headed, in my opinion, right? Because why else would you have, a paper form or even a disconnected job report, right? So like now it can be connected with all the other things that give you back the data and information that you can actually use to make decisions, right? So if you were having a problem on site, if you did have a subcontractor, maybe not working as efficiently, or you had, red flags coming up, whose job is it to analyze that and figure that out? Who's doing that? And again, is that administrative task? Is that like, would an administrator be able to do all that? So again, these are really cool places where we can implement some of the AI, because it can analyze those things for you. You can have commands for that where it's, it's actually able to, give you back a report, and they're pretty good, right? Or you have a senior project manager or somebody that's overseeing it. But the point again here is that we should all be building our businesses around these key indicator points, these red flags, these known problems, all right, and be looking at them in terms of a solution to solving problems. So if you have a inefficient crew, you have, problems with your subs, you're having the same repeated problems happening over and over again. First step I would recommend all along is like, what's your framework look like? What are the rules to the game? What are the things that we're trying to enforce? All right. And then what are we actually measuring? Okay. Because if you came to me and said, hey, you know what, my crews suck, which a lot of you guys do, and I'm like, oh, well, why is that? Well, I don't know. I'm not making enough money. We're not making profit on the jobs. We're having all these callbacks, these change orders. I have to kind of look at that problem and go, okay, prove it. Show me. Where are you seeing these problems happen? Like, show me in your job costs, and show me, like, where is this stuff coming out that you feel this way? And for a lot of you, and we've had these uncomfortable conversations, the truth is it's just the way you feel that day, right? You have a hunch, but you have no way of actually quantifying it, right? Big change happens in your business, and this is where real growth happens, is when you can quantify that. Right? It's great to have an idea. It's great, sometimes we have these feelings, but if you want to grow and scale the business, you need to be able to quantify these assumptions. You need to be able to remove any of the gray area around either it's happening, it's not happening, it's a yes, no question. Like, these are really, really important for you getting outside of your business, right? If you're not prepared to go down this or if you're uncomfortable going down this road, you're going to have a very, very difficult time finding people that can run your business for you, all right? Because maybe you have the intuition and you can stay on top of it, but take you out of the equation, what happens, right? You care. You will never find anyone else that cares as much about your business as you, all right? I don't care. Hired hundreds of employees and staff. Some of them have been excellent, all right? But no one will ever care about your business as much as you, right? So when we break that down further, like, how are we keeping people accountable? How do we know what's going on in our business, and how do we keep our emotions at check and in balance, right? Especially if we're growing. This is where it really matters. And I hope you guys are taking my clues here. If you want to grow your business, you're going to be in a position where you are managing things you haven't managed before, right? Great. We're going to grow from 1 million to 3 million. Right? All of a sudden, your role in every position in your business changes. Okay. How do we keep that under control without going crazy? How do we keep it profitable? You have to measure. You have to have a system in every area of your business that allows you to see what's happening real time or close to it, and allows you to make informed decisions on how to correct it. Okay. Is any of this stuff resonating? Is anybody getting any takeaways from this? Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, go ahead.
No, I was gonna say, even what you just said, like, I think the understanding of, if you want to take your business to the next level, doubling, tripling profits, revenue, whatever, like, you have to change yourself, your job description, your role.
Right.
So.
Right. Well, and again, I'll give you this good example. Has anybody had this experience, is where, you get a thought in your mind, all of a sudden you can't shake it. It gives you anxiety. Like, I have a pacing problem, so like I'll pace back and forth, and I will be convinced myself that something is going on, right? And the only way that I can dismiss it without taking, taking actions, all right, is to look at my data, all right, is to be able to go back. And again, I've had it with sales, I've had it in production, I've had it, in every area of the business, all right. And really, that I could be dead wrong. And I have been many, many times, been absolutely, completely wrong. All right. The difference between me going and blowing it all up, all right, getting rid of firing people, all right, maybe that deserved it or didn't deserve it, right, was how I look at the problem and how I can confirm either something's happening or something's not happening, right? And I think a lot of you guys, if you take the simple things like what I'm suggesting to you, right, it starts with your framework, right? There's a good term, form follows function, right? So this is a form, right? We're going to create a set of rules, a policy, a procedure, all right? And then we're going to measure who's actually performing that policy or procedure, all right? At the end of that, we can be hands off, right? It becomes very clear, either this guy's doing it, it's a yes or a no question, right? If you had a yes or a no answer, do you think you could make a good decision from that point?
You got clarity.
Right. So then that leads to what? Certainty, leads to confidence, leads to actually taking action. Right.
Yeah.
Where I see this happen over and over again is guys aren't clear. They don't have certainty. They have an idea, they have a thought, and they're scared to take action because of what the potential consequences could be. Right. I see this a lot with guys that hang on to bad subs, bad employees, bad staff, like, oh, well, I need them to do the next job, without really knowing for sure, hey, this is the impact that's happening, right? Here's the losses we're taking. Here's the, my business isn't growing. I'm, this is how much time I'm putting into it. All of those things are things we can calculate. All right. And then what that's going to tell you is whether you need to make a change, and it's going to be very clear, right? It's actually empowering. There's without a doubt, like, hey, if this subcontractor we lose money on and he's got all of these red flags going up, do we need to get rid of him? Absolutely, right? Whereas some people would hang on to them. I think that happens more often than not, right? Okay. Any other takeaways? Any other things that that maybe you're unclear of that I can help to explain a little bit more clearer?
Hey, Jay, one of the things that I wanted to mention, if it's okay, is
Yeah.
one of the things that we need to be real careful also as contractors. It's a little new to me on this AI stuff,
Mhm.
but I guess a lot of that's got to do with age. But one of the things is we need to be careful, we don't fall into the dreaded 7 Ps of, the piss poor performance equals piss poor management is the way it ends up. That's one of the things that we need to be careful of. And I run into this a lot with subcontractors too, that they just drag their feet. And we've started just trying to give them a letter to start out with, telling them, and then some of them get pissed off and they don't come back. But just that's where it's important to go back to the database of subs that we've used in the past and try to keep going. And it's not really all about pricing. It's just, I'm more concerned. We try to pride ourselves more on quality than anything. And it's for what it's worth. We've been in business over 20 years, and it's just kind of hard for us to learn some of the new techniques sometimes.
Totally. So, but none of what I've shared here is new in terms of the like you're already doing these things, a daily job report, having notices to perform, like those aren't like nothing. I'm not reinventing the wheel. Where AI comes into play, and I'll make some clarity on this. And I know it's very overwhelming when I say that word, for a lot of people, and because they don't necessarily understand it. There is no such thing as an unsupervised AI. Right? AI is simply a tool. Okay. And what AI allows us to do now is to do these things without as much human error or without as much delay in getting that information back. Right. So if you think about it, it's, again, it's it's moving things along faster. The system doesn't change, the process doesn't change. The only thing that's really changing in there is how quickly we can move and take action with it, right? And how much people energy goes into it, right? So again, if you're paying a project manager 140 grand a year, and he's having to handle all these stupid little things all along the way, well, what's the value that you're putting on that, right? A lot of this is administrative. Again, filing these reports, having these situations. Like now you can use AI to literally dictate what the situation's happening, all right, on the thing. They don't need to go and fill out a form. They don't need to open up their laptop or anything. They can dictate it. And now you've got a record of that. And you can give the AI instructions to write the report, write the change work order, write the, notice to perform and send it as an email. So like that's really saving time. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does.
Right. So, and again, at the end of the day, we should be looking at arming our team with tools that save them time, that make their lives easier and that are simple to use. Like that's one thing, like with the AI, like you can easily make it more complicated than it needs to be. Right. And there's a trillion uses for it. It's a shiny object. It really is a shiny object. All right. But we always try to look at like, what's the practical application for it, right? And the simplest way is filling in forms. To me, like, do you enjoy filling in forms? Does anybody
No.
here enjoy filling out forms?
No.
Anybody woke up in the morning, been like, I've got a pile of forms to fill out today. I'm so excited about that.
Oh, no.
The only time it's enjoyable is when you get the autofill. It does everything at once.
So this is what I'm saying though, like AI will fill all that in for you. And now you're just like, it's asking you questions, you're answering. Right? Boom, boom, boom. So like, again, that's a simple way to make things easier. And what we're talking about here is form and function, right? All of the things that I've brought up, it started with a policy or procedure. There's nothing new or, innovative about that. We should all have them in certain situations. Only difference on the back end is how quickly we fill in those forms. And like, again, if you overwhelm people with filling out paperwork, especially project managers, site supervisors and stuff, like it's just not going to happen, right? We just know that. Technicians, all of that, like nobody likes doing it. It's paperwork, right? It's probably the reason they got into the trades was to avoid that. So now the alternative there is don't, right? Think about an easier way that you can get that data back. We know it's important. We know the value of it. All right, without being a burden to your team, and you're going to see a big difference in how it gets done, and ultimately, like again, how efficiently your business can run. Cool. Got a little off track there at the end, but I always love talking about this particular topic. So I hope you guys have got some value from today. If you didn't grab your document, I'm going to throw it back in the chat here. I'll be updating a couple of other things too. And I'll put in some other forms, change orders, stuff like that you can share with subs that we've used. And I hope everyone